What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater. And before we jump in, make sure to like the video down below, comment what somebody would like addressed in a future video, and as always, subscribe on YouTube down below to be informed of upcoming videos and live streams. Ring that bell. But let's jump into today's topic, variety in long-form improv shows. Today's video is going to be part one in a two-part series all about variety in long-form improv shows. Next week, I'm going to talk about variety in short-form improv shows. If you're newer to improv, as a quick little definition or just a description between the two formats of short form and long form improv, short form improv is generally what you would see in, Whose Line Is It Anyway, where there's various games with predetermined rules attached to them, and there's a host who grabs suggestions based on the game and has them perform the game. So a few examples are, a game called Blind Line, where the audience gives out lines of dialogue that the host writes down on pieces of paper, and then cast members who are unaware of these lines come back into the room and do a scene, and every so often they grab a line of dialogue, read it, and incorporate it into the scene.
Looks like somebody has a bad case of the Mondays. You haven't had a good date in a while, huh?
No one dates me.
There's various types of short form games. I'll get into that next week. There's physical based games, guessing games, elimination games, joke telling games, so many things. Long form improv is a style where, there's less audience interaction. There's not really a preset host. It's a little bit more organic where, generally someone will grab a suggestion, a word, or anything from the audience. And more often than not, that's the only time they get a suggestion. And then they'll do a series of scenes. They might do a narrative-based, story, an improvised play or a movie or even a musical, or maybe they'll just do a series of scenes that are connected and have through lines. But rather than, stopping every scene and going back to the audience, it flows a little bit more seamlessly into the next scene. There's a lot of videos online that compare and contrast short form versus long form. Rather than make a video about that, I'll just recommend one. Go check out Paul Vallaincourt Improv Tip 162. It talks about all the similarities and differences between long form and short form, as well as the benefits and traps that you might fall into. So check that out. The link is down in the description down below. Now to the topic of variety in long form improv shows. I tell my students this all the time. Variety is crucial to our shows because I've seen a lot of improvised long-form sets that feel very samey, It's two people do a 2-minute scene, edit. Two people do a 2-minute scene, edit. Two people do a 2 or 3-minute scene, edit. And it just feels like, even though the scenes are very different, just like the presentation is very samey, which makes the viewer sometimes view it as not really different, even though the content of the scenes can be very different. We live in a very different age right now where we have, just like 3 seconds to capture people's attention. But once we capture that attention, we gotta retain it, again, with variety. I like to use sketch comedy shows as a parallel to describe variety that we can also attain in our improv comedy shows. So not in an SNL I'm talking about. I'm talking about in a stage sketch comedy show that you would go to watch. So a good example is like Second City. They do great sketch comedy shows, and what makes them great is the pacing, the variety that they instill in these shows. So they have a very unique structure where, they would have maybe the cast come out and do an opening scene to introduce themselves and set the tone of the show. They, of course, have sketches that involve different, premises, different physicality, different pacing. They also really play around with length. Length is crucial. I talked about, 2-person scene, edit, 2-person scene, edit. All of these scenes not only have 2 people, but they're also around the same length, 2 or 3 minutes. So I always tell people hey, maybe you do a 3 or 4 minute scene and you edit it. What if the next scene was only 10 seconds, That's cool, because this is what is in the sketch comedy world called a blackout, where you might watch like a 4-minute scene and then, lights go out, music blasts, lights come up, you're like, oh, it's gonna be another 4-minute sketch. And suddenly, 10 seconds, boom, there's a big out and the sketch is over within like a blink of an eye. So the people watching are like, oh my gosh, I have to pay attention because I don't want to miss that in the future, right? That's what we got to do with pacing, variety, length. Let me get into some of it right now. I just touched on it, but length is crucial, okay? We have internalized clocks in our head, and we can sense when stuff that is happening feels very same in terms of the amount of time, right? So let's vary up the timing. If you're doing an improv scene, or if you're watching an improv scene and you see like a big poppy fun moment happen within 10, 15 seconds, why not edit it? You know? I'm not saying you have to do this every time because then you'll get into the pitfall of, oh, all your scenes are only 10 seconds long, and that's gonna be a tough show to run, but maybe every so often you might just choose to edit a scene at like a 10, 15 second mark or when that big first pop moment happens, right? Why not? Because here's the thing, you can always come back to these scenes. In fact, one of my favorite things that's done in an improv show that's also done in sketch comedy shows is called the runner, where you return to maybe, a premise or a character that was edited within 15 seconds the first time, and you return to them, and then they get edited again within 15 seconds. An example that happened from a show that I was in was we had a stand-up comedian come in, and they did a set, and we took inspiration from their set to inspire our scenes. And he made reference to, something about a second hole, which is weird, right? And I was like, oh, that's a strange thing. I'm gonna do a scene about it. So I came in as like a mad scientist who was like trying to figure out, the existence of the third asshole. And I got edited within 10 seconds. It was a big pop moment, like everyone was like, remember that moment from the stand-up comedian set, and then whatever, I got edited. I laughed it off too. And then I came back again, maybe like 10 minutes later, and I was starting to go into my plan. Whoa, I got this giant ship and we're gonna shrink it down to discover the third asshole. And I got edited again within 10 seconds. And again, it was kind of turning into somewhat of a game that we were playing. And then my character actually ended up ending the show where I finally discovered the third asshole. And that was just a fun moment that we reached through shorter scenes, Because if they were all long scenes, then, that premise kind of dies away pretty quick. But since we attacked it in little bits, like little morsels, we were able to carry it to a conclusion. So, as a takeaway is, vary up the length of the scenes. If you just had a 4-minute scene, don't do another 4-minute scene. Cut it down, okay? Maybe do a 2-minute scene, a 1-minute scene, 30-second scene. Play around with length. I know sometimes it might interfere with like, oh, that person got more stage time and I just went out and got a 15-second scene. Here's the thing, stage time, in my opinion, it doesn't matter, okay? It's the moments that we create that matter. I'd much rather like have a big moment that it only took me 15 seconds to get that resonates with the audience rather than a 4-minute moment that also might resonate with the audience, We remember quick stuff. Now let's jump into tone. Tone is also really important because I've seen a lot of shows that get really stuck up on like one tone and let it kind of consume them, and then that's just what the show becomes. More often than not, it's a negative tone. So like I've seen this happen a bunch of times where an improv set begins and the host is out there getting everybody all fired up, excited to watch the show, and then the lights go down, lights come up, and the first scene someone goes out and says, I'm dying, All that energy that just like filled the room is now sucked out into the void. And then we have to work to get it back. So at the very top of the show, that first scene, like maybe start more positive or big at least, You can have a conflict, negative-based scene, but make it big, like a boxing fight, an exciting scene, rather than just like, a passive-aggressive conflict. And we're like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. Because again, you're not complimenting the energy that you just got from the room. So, or when in doubt, start positive. Start your shows positive. 2 people start on stage. Maybe they get each other, they like each other, they're having like a positive, fun moment, a fun experience. And that's a great spot to start the show, And I'm not saying every single scene has to be positive. No, of course not. With tone, vary it up a little bit. If you had a scene with like more anger as like a primary emotion, the next scene shouldn't have a bunch of anger as well, or negative feelings. Maybe it would be a more happy scene or a romantic scene or something like that. take the emotion from one scene and see if you can do a contrasting emotion in the next scene to show that variety. Because otherwise, you'll just have a bunch of like negative scenes, throughout the entire montage. And that is something that can, again, become samey and tiresome. And the next big thing is presentation, okay? This word encompasses a lot of stuff when it comes to variety. Think of a variety show. There's a lot of different things that happen. There might be like a stand-up comedian. There's a musical act. Maybe there's another like talent-based thing or an interview. There's a lot of different types of scenarios and types of presentation. So in your improv shows, I always say, vary up presentation. And this can come in a lot of different forms. First of all, how many people are in a scene? If you just had a 2-person scene, maybe the next scene start with 3 or 4 people. Or maybe it starts with 2 people, but there'll be like 2 people who walk on and join the scene. That's a great way to vary up presentation, is the amount of people that are seen on stage, because it sets up a stage picture. And again, if we just see 2 people standing on stage talking to each other for scene after scene after scene after scene, then it becomes samey, even though the scenes can all be drastically different. It's a stage picture that we view. You can also vary up a lot of different things. Physicality, for example. I love physicality in scenes. So if you had a scene that was set maybe at a job interview, 2 people sitting at a desk, and pretty much for the whole scene they were sitting, or like 2 people sitting in a car. The next scene, don't sit down, engage in an activity, like start digging, or start, watering plants, or start, fishing. Do something that's more physical. There's other types of variety that I love to see in shows. I love to see big group scenes where maybe there's a bunch of people who are being non-humans, like maybe animals, or just painting the environment. I've seen like a scene before where like there was 2 people in a haunted house, and there was 8 people. They all came on stage and were a different part of the haunted house to kind of create that illusion that this place is scary, and we can actually visualize it now. Or like, hey, presentation. I love it when people come on stage and start singing, doing like a musical number or a dance routine. I love that stuff. Anytime the presentation on the stage, is different, then I remember it more. It feels like a more complete piece of art, piece of comedy, piece of entertainment, whatever you want to call it. So inject that presentation variety into your show, and it will become more fun, not just for the audience, but also for you. To put this into practice, maybe create for yourself a variety checklist. After a show, go through all the scenes and see if you can check off certain points. Like maybe one of them is, did you have a scene that was less than 30 seconds? Did you have a group scene with maybe, 4 or more people, depending upon your group size? Maybe everybody was in the scene. Did you have a really strong physical scene, Like maybe there was a scene that was like a race, or maybe there was a scene where there was a fight while doing dishes in the kitchen, something along those lines. Maybe you had a callback, where you revisit a past scene in a new scenario or a new situation, progress through time. Those are great. Callbacks are awesome. I think we don't see enough of those, so maybe try for a callback in a scene. Again, when a scene gets edited, it's not done. You can always bring it back, and I encourage you to. Maybe you can also look into, was there a solo scene? Like, did someone start a scene by themselves? Was there a scene where somebody walked on stage and then maybe left, which is typically referred to as just like a walk-on, where they come in, drop a line, and then leave? Did you have any interesting patterns that were established? That's also cool. So those are just a few things. You can create your own variety checklist, but go through a show after you've done it and just kind of see what made this show special, what made it memorable. And a lot of times it comes down to the variety that you instill in it. So try it out. Try doing maybe a montage where every single scene cannot be like the previous scene at all. If the first scene had 2 people having, an argument with each other, the next scene cannot have 2 people. It can't be about an argument. And hey, if it was 2 people sitting in a chair, you can't be sitting down. So you put 2 scenes next to each other, they have to be 100% different. Try that out as a little challenge when you do a long form montage next time. And that concludes this episode of MUT Tips, everybody. Thank you so much. Again, check out next week. I'm gonna do variety and short form improv shows. If you enjoyed the video, again, like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll check you out next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye.